Praise the Lord, for he has risen. You thought that he was dead for over a year, but now he has returned, and Flanker Jesus is here to save us all. Because the new update dropped, and instead of rushing out a video and then rushing out a second video to retract the first video on my very first impressions on the patch on the very day, I am letting the patch marinate a little bit and seeing what happens with Typhoon and Rafal, because when I cover the planes, I want them to be finished. And right now I feel that they're not finished, because like as I'm recording this, Gaijin is like in the process of like fixing the Eurofighter radar, or it's already been fixed, but people say it's not fixed. Rafal got 8 missiles and more countermeasures, and it's like I'm gonna wait like a little bit and see what happens before really worrying about those. And also, I was really excited to see that the Flanker flight model received a huge buff in exactly the way that everyone was hoping that it would for the past year. Because as it turns out, at least allegedly on the forums, I'm going to take it with a grain of salt because it's like being relayed through 3 different forum posters. Gaijin was using the manual for the Su-27 prototype as the reference for how the plane should perform, and not the production model. Now, for nobody that knows anything about Su-27, the prototype, the very first one, was kind of like Wish.com Su-27 at home, like a child drew it on a piece of paper. They made the airframe, they tested it, and like went like, hey, wait a second, this one fucking sucks. Go back and do it again. And then they made like an actual plane like this one. And Gaijin apparently was using the wrong manual as a reference. So that's allegedly what happened. I don't know if that's actually the case. They might have just been like, well, it'd be too good if they had a blah, blah, blah. It seems plausible. The new performance of the plane seems plausible. I don't know if it's accurate, but it's probably inaccurate in exactly the same ways that every other flight model is inaccurate now, in the effect that basically in Warthunder, from all of the testing that I have done, including F-16, Mirage 2000, and like Gripen, my kind of conclusion is that the energy retention across the board is too high at high speeds, at high turn rates, and then too low at low speeds and low turn rates. Now, previously, one of my kind of rabbit holes that I went down is there is footage of the Su-27 at the 1989 or something Paris Air Show where it debuted, and one of the big claims, and you can actually just like watch the demonstration, where it can do a 360-degree turn in 13 seconds. That's not a sustained turn. It's just like it starts at, let's call it like 800 kph. Guy pulls 9 Gs and holds 9 Gs, and then it trickles down, and 13 seconds later he's made a 360-degree turn. And you can watch it, and there's a stopwatch on the demonstration. So unless they did some like crazy like speeding it up thing, or like dilated time, or they made like a Su-27 just for the Paris Air Show that was made out of like nothing but titanium and carbon fiber before it even existed, and then they ran it on nuclear fuel, it's probably accurate, which, I mean, seems pretty reasonable to me. There is no evidence that I've ever seen that any of the air show planes are like specially modified for demonstrating at air shows. Like, I don't think them adding like nuclear powered engines to make the turn time slightly less is really like all that beneficial, because air shows are their propaganda and their marketing and proper marketing, but nobody's like making super duper special high performance airframes just for the air show. Like, at best they'll remove like the radar and some of the avionics, and they'll gas up the plane with like just enough fuel for the demonstration. Previously, to do the 13-second turn, to try to redo that in Warthunder, you had to do like 11.5 Gs, which is way above like the limit of like what the plane's designed to do and what the fly-by-wire system will allow it to do. And you had to do it at high speed, and you had to do it on 40 seconds fuel, which is probably worth more than all of the avionics that they could have like possibly removed from the airframe for like the Paris Air Show. So I haven't gone back and I haven't tried to do the 13-second turn on like, say, like 7, 8 minutes, 10 minutes of fuel, because after the last video, all the effort I had to put into like cutting that together, like I just don't want to do it. I want to drink my beer, and I just want to be positive about how this changes everything. And the answer is, for EC, it changes a lot of things, and it changes things in ways that you don't really probably comprehend right off the bat, because is 1v1 dogfighting necessarily, like, is this the most important thing in EC? And the answer is no. The most important thing in EC is like shooting your radar missile off at a guy and then turning away, getting to your notch, and then avoiding his radar missile, and then getting out of your notch, shooting your radar missile again, and then going back to it. And this flight model change actually makes it better at doing that too, because now you can basically get into your notch quicker, get out of it quicker, and you're not losing as much speed, so you're actually maintaining a lot more viability. You don't have to be extremely careful anymore. It also means that in your flat maps, like Denmark or Sinai, the two most popular maps in Sim, when you do merge, even against something like the Typhoon, the Rafale, the Gripen, those planes, you have a fighting chance now. You don't have to rely on maintaining like 850 kph in like a big rate turn and just hope that they bleed themselves of energy so that you can then pull in for your one shot. You actually have the ability to transition between high speed, medium speed, and low speed fighting in a way that is almost as effective as the F-15A. Now, to put this in like terms that kind of make sense, is I've done a bunch of duels, and we're going up against a Gripen. It's flown by Countdown, and Countdown's like not the best, but he's pretty solid. He's better than your average EC player is going to be. And the big thing to look at here is we got sensor view up, and we can look at the speed side by side. And the big thing to notice is that I'm able to actually conserve energy while not sacrificing a bunch of position, and I'm actually able to pull hard and compete with the Gripen on kind of its same terms. Previously, any flight model like the Gripen or the F-15A, the F-16, A for sure, even to the F-16C, the learning curve for beating the flanker was just learning to recognize that, hey, the plane can't hold energy. You can either run it out of energy by maintaining yours and hoping he pulls too hard, or you come in, you pull really hard, and that puts him in a defensive position where, in order for him to get out of it, he has to sacrifice a bunch of energy to get out of it. Really, previously, the only plane that the Su-27 would consistently beat would be something like the F-15C, and that's only if the other person in the flanker had spent even more time trying to perfect like the trajectories and learning exactly how to do it than I have. I don't think that most EC players really have time for that, and I also think the F-15C is probably the weakest of the top-tier flight models as far as dogfighting is concerned right now. There are issues, like, not issues with it, because the F-15C still functions as a pretty competent missile bus. It's still very fast up high. It still has very respectable stall control. It's just worse than the flanker now, which is, I think, overall is fine, because it still has a better radar. It still has better long-range missiles. So if it's fighting the way that it should, which is like, I don't know, go up to altitude, go to Mach 2, shoot your AMRAAMs off, and then like go back to base, it's still kind of untouchable by anything that is a Eurofighter. Is it a fun, dynamic way to play the game? Not really. To me, it's kind of one note and boring, but it's consistent, and it does feel like a niche. But with the flanker flight model buffs, the flanker is better in its own niche, where it's also a missile bus, but it's a missile bus with close range missiles that are backed up by an IRST and a radar that is still abysmal in pretty much every metric. The one place where the Su-27 radar is good is exactly the opposite of where the missiles are good as well. Like the Su-27 radar for detecting targets all the way across the map in TWS head-on mode is pretty solid. Like, legitimately, you can detect things further out than they can detect you. Your missiles are not very good at long range, and your update rate, once you get close, you tend to lose targets up close with how the radar scan pattern works. So you're still handicapped in EC, but one of your major handicaps is removed. Also, the IRST is one of those tools that can help you kind of bridge that gap in target detection, where it's not so bad. I would say that this plane right now is on par with any of the other top tiers as far as utility goes. Usability, like user friendliness, the sensors are a big part of it. If target rendering range was further, like if black dots rendered further in EC for top tier, the reliance on sensors would be like a little bit less. Like if they took the dot rendering range and moved it from 11 kilometers to like 20 to 30 kilometers, using your HMD to lock a potential target instead of kind of like using HMD and kind of like just using it as a flashlight and guessing, would be a lot more effective. So you do have some handicaps, but one of the biggest ones and one of the most aggravating ones is now like removed. At least now you get to a dogfight and you can look at it and you're like, okay, the fight's on. It also means that instead of spending like 50% of your energy learning how to make something that doesn't work, and another 50% of your energy spending time to learn how to make the other thing that doesn't work, i.e. the radar work, means you could just spend 100% of your time on making the radar like sort of work, or making the whole entire sensor suite work, and it'll be fine now. With that being said, are there any like future buffs in store for it? Probably not. But the only thing that could really come in the future is if someone looks up the NO001, whatever the improved version that the SM has, and if they find that it has like narrow scan radar modes, then the SU-27 would go from being pretty solid in EC right now to probably being one of the best, because the narrow scan radar mode would solve pretty much all of the problems with the radar update refresh rate. And with ASA radars coming in, PESA radars coming in, and Gaijin's still in the process of modeling those. They haven't really like figured it out yet, so I'm expecting changes to those. Like the Rafale has an ASA or a PESA depending on how they modeled it. It scans like fast, but it's like a really tall scan. So you're scanning more of the sky, so your refresh rate is kind of about the same as some of the mechanical radars on narrow scan. So it's not like a radical change, but in the future with the Kafir that they announced with the ASA radar, it might be different. Also, because the flight model is buffed, because now that we know the base model flanker is pretty good and pretty solid, it also means that any of the upgraded flankers, like the SU-30 with thrust vectoring, the SU-37 or whatever, SU-37S, the improved 1990s flanker that had 3D thrust vectoring, if that thing comes to the game, it could be really actually freaking insane. The SU-35, the one that is currently in service, the SU-35S, could be pretty dang insane. I don't think that those need to come to the game right now. I think we probably need to let this stuff marinate. We probably should get the F-18. Like, the more that they wait on the F-18, the more irrelevant it's going to become. I'm also kind of glad that, at least in the grand scheme of things right now, the Eurofighter Typhoon and the Rafale don't have early model Gripen syndrome, where you win just by doing the equivalent of holding your S key. You just don't pull back on the stick and then out-energy everything. There is at least some nuance. I think the Rafale and the Eurofighter might be the best flight models as far as like one versus ones are concerned, or the whole notch, get out of the way, counter launch, that thing, like actually slinging radar missiles. Like those things are legitimately good. I think the Rafale right now is a good bit better than the Eurofighter as far as utility goes, because it has the HMD with IFF, it has IRST on red side. The German one doesn't have IRST. The Italian and the UK ones do. And the Captor M radar is basically, it's allegedly fixed now. The TWS problems are allegedly eliminated according to the Warthunder community manager. And if there are no improvements made to Captor M, it is a thoroughly run-of-the-mill radar that is basically on par with the current Gripen radar and the current F-16C radar, which, mind you, is not bad. You have a Mach 2 Omega Climb AMRAAM slinger with a good radar, with a good refresh rate, and good search patterns that is plenty usable. It's just not the hyper pseudo ASA that all of the, Brit people were looking to cook up. That doesn't mean that the radar will not change in the future. It's just simply the Gaijin community manager has basically said, like, hey, dude, you can't just link news articles that say that this radar is better than this and then specify literally nothing. You can't just do that. There's, like, at least some kind of standard, like, how much better is it? What does it actually do? What's the scan pattern, scan range, blah, blah, blah. Radar rabbit hole that I don't want to go down. Now, that we did get a little bit distracted by, like, the current ongoings of the game, let's get back to the dogfights. Now, previously, the SU-27 would lose to the F-15E in these, like, gigantic Mach 1 kind of raider loops. Like, you could just maintain energy, out-energy the SU-27, and there really wasn't a lot that it could do about it. And that is no longer the case, because in addition to the changes to the Oswald efficiency, the SU-27SM has received an upgraded engine. It does make a good bit of more thrust, and this is important for straight line performance, gaining your speed back, climb rate, stuff like that, things that set you up for success in EC. It's really nice. Now, because the SU-27SM is heavier than the regular Russian SU-27S, in a dogfight, they're basically equivalent. The 400 kilograms or so of extra weight in the SM does end up kind of increasing the bleed rates and decreasing the gain rates probably just a little bit, so that they're basically on par with each other. I have dueled both of these planes now, and honestly, the regular S might be slightly better, but we are still in the process of relearning the SU-27, because effectively, it is an entirely new flight model. At least that is the way that I'm treating it. With that being said, there is another change that I have noticed that probably flew under the radar, and it's kind of like that changed just before the patch. It was kind of like to the low speed stability. And to me, that change means that at low speeds, the pitching momentum negative is actually more defined. So this is like a pretty good clip of kind of like showcasing what that is. And so when I go to the Cobra, it's going to pull the nose down to the red arrow, and I'm trying to angle the trajectory towards the green arrow, and because this seems a little bit more pronounced, it does open up a little bit more space than usual. So it means that kind of in your Cobra moments, you're gonna have to relearn those. You're gonna have to kind of relearn how to really kind of judge how much speed you need at low speed and learn how to get your position to where you are. Because like in that case, like just looking at that replay, and keep in mind, I'm watching these more or less fresh as you guys are. In that instance, like if I angled the cockpit and twisted the plane so that the nose was facing the opposite direction, I might have been able to use that kind of like neg-G momentum that comes from the plane to actually maintain the position, keep the planes closer together so that the F-15C wasn't able to angle back in. Now, the other thing that people talk about is R-73 buff, and here's the R-73 buff. Just watch. We're going to come around, we're going to get a lock, and there is no buff. The R-73 is exactly the same as it's always been. You will get some really goofy shots where it goes, and it looks like it goes through flares. You'll get other shots where they just completely fall off the rails, and just like, well, okay, well, I guess that's that. And there are no changes to the R-73 as far as I can tell. Nobody's seen anything in the files, and every time a new patch comes out, some bozo will make some kind of thing like, this missile's been shadow buffed. There are no shadow buffs. The 180-degree mica has always been a thing. If you could space the planes out correctly, you could always kind of get it there. You could do it enough times, eventually it would pull around 180 degrees. Same thing with like goofy R-73 shots. These have always been a thing. It's been a very wonky, weird missile through its whole duration. I don't think it's any different now than it's ever been. Anyways, moving on to planes that can actually beat this thing, which is the F-15A still beats this thing. The F-16A still beats this thing. A lot of the matchups have not really changed that much, but the margins are a lot smaller, and that's really, really important, because previously the F-15A was probably the hardest matchup for this, or at least when I got Butters flying the F-15A, or I got T-Rex flying the F-15A, because both of those guys have played a lot of F-15A, played a lot of duels where the kind of skill ceiling for how to play the F-15 has more or less been kind of met. Yeah, there's probably some more refinement down the road, because every time we come back to this and then one of us wins, we don't like losing, so I'm like, okay, we're gonna relearn, we're gonna do it again. And that's kind of why I haven't immediately rushed out an SU-27 video, is because I am still, even after 5, 6 hours, 7 hours of like doing this, I am still in the process of relearning the flight model, because with the energy retention now, means that there are moments in the trajectorying, in the dogfighting, where you might actually want to use the air brake, where it's not a complete death sentence to do so. It's also not a death sentence to start a little bit slower than the other guy and go slow. You're no longer going to be confined to kind of like looking at a guy and going, oh, he's not incompetent, I'm just going to die now. But the F-15A still kind of does most of the same things that you do, does them a little bit better. In some speed ranges, it'll be a little bit worse. But overall, when it comes to the lore between the two planes, I think this is not accurate physically, as far as like, oh, at X speed, the F-15 does this, and Y speed, the SU-27 does this. But comparatively, it does feel that if you control for the Warthunder parallel universe of 11G turns and all that stuff, these two planes do sort of match the dynamic of the real-life counterparts, which is nice. I think that's a good thing to have. The same thing goes for being reasonably well balanced against Rafale and Typhoon. Now, I think Rafale and Typhoon, once people learn how to fly those, it might not be as close as it is on, like, you know, the first like 3 days of the patch. That is something that we're going to have to experiment with. The Typhoon, in its current iteration of flight model, is probably really, really strong in air RB, because that initial turn where you just kind of like flip around and get guns on right away, and you get guns on close enough in air RB where you can just like shoot with mouse aim, that's probably unbeatable. In SB, it's more beatable because of the range constraints. Like, guys are not flipping around and then shooting you at 1,000 meters in SB, or at least doing it with any sort of consistency. And it means that running the Typhoon out of energy and fighting it that way is something that is very well possible. Same thing with Rafale. There might be the ability to kind of sit at like a 850 kilometer per hour turn and just kind of like run around his nose, and yeah, he'll get like his guns on you, but he's gonna be shooting too far away and it's gonna be falling out of the sky. And as long as you are able to chaff the Micas and stuff, you might be able to win that way. Which, that was not something that I expected. That is not something that I expected to be saying this early in a patch like this. I was expecting Rafale to come out and Typhoon to come out and be like, well, here's two more planes that beat the SU-27 and beat it even harder than ever before. And that's really good news. That should make everyone really, really happy. It means that you can get back in your SU-27 and you have what is effectively a new plane that you can kind of go back and like, oh, I'm going to learn some things. And really, aside from grinding out the Rafale and the Typhoon, I am going to be playing the SU-27 and EC, so I can make a video and show you guys like how to play it and actually like take advantage of it, because I think it's a good plane now. I think it's worth your time, and that's a Beer Thunder.